Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into Mark Bates's brilliant commentary on Matthew chapter 13. We're going to unpack a really fascinating theological mystery, how exactly God's reign is expanding in the world right now. You know, when we look around, things can seem incredibly chaotic or totally broken. But if we look closely at the parables of Jesus, we're actually handed a profound structural blueprint of exactly what's happening behind the scenes.
So, let's just jump right into the big paradox here. This was the absolute core dilemma for first-century Judaism. The people of that era were looking around and wondering, okay, if the long-promised royal reign of Yahweh is actually present in the Messiah right now, why hasn't he immediately destroyed all the wicked powers? Why hasn't everything been instantly restored politically and socially? Honestly, it's a completely fair question, right? If the ultimate king is here, why is the world still broken?
To answer that question, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The Great Kingdom Paradox, 2. Sowing the Kingdom's Word, 3. Growing alongside the weeds, 4. Small seeds, massive growth, and finally 5. The final eschatological harvest.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1. The Great Kingdom Paradox, expectation versus reality. We've got to start by addressing the massive gap between what people expected God's reign to look like and the reality that Jesus actually brought to the table. Just look at how these two visions contrast. The expectation in the first century was an instantaneous, coercive, and let's face it, violent triumph. They wanted an immediate political overthrow of evil empires. But Jesus reveals something entirely different. He reveals a kingdom that enters history in a hidden, gradual way. It's based entirely on the proclamation of the word. And wild enough, it actually coexists right alongside evil in advance of the final judgment.
And this brings us to a really foundational concept called inaugurated eschatology. Mark Bates highlights this by pointing to Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s promise plan theology. Basically, Jesus is drawing on the Old Testament, specifically the apocalyptic visions we see in Daniel chapter 2, to show that the divine kingdom enters human history in an unexpected, hidden form first. It arrives in 2 historical stages. It's inaugurated right now, quietly working in the present, but it will absolutely culminate later in full, visible apocalyptic glory.
Moving right along to part 2. Sowing the Kingdom's Word, the method of expansion.
So, if the kingdom isn't expanding by the sword or through some immediate political conquest, how exactly is it growing today? Well, Jesus explains this method through the famous parable of the sower. He shows us that the word of the kingdom is scattered broadly and indiscriminately across all kinds of unplowed ground. But it faces 4 very distinct types of human reception. First, you have the roadside. This is hardened ground where the evil one just snatches the word right away. Second, the rocky places. This is a shallow, highly emotional reception. It sprouts fast but has 0 roots, so the moment persecution hits, it trips up. Third, the thorny ground. The word takes root here, but Jesus specifically notes that the anxieties of this age and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it out. Bates actually notes this beautifully echoes the creational curse of thorns all the way back in Genesis 3. And finally, you have the good soil, the faithful hearer who understands the word and yields massive, life-transforming fruit.
And that brings us to a crucial point. Right after this, Jesus says, "He who has ears, let him hear." When the disciples ask him why he's teaching in parables, Jesus actually quotes the prophet Isaiah chapter 6. He explains that these parables act as a judicial hardening to those who are unrepentant and self-hardened, while simultaneously revealing the mysteries of the kingdom to the faithful. What this really means is that true spiritual perception isn't just about raw intellect. It absolutely requires divine illumination and a willing heart.
Let's move to part 3. Growing alongside the weeds, the enigma of coexistence.
Now you might be wondering, if the kingdom is here, why is evil still just chilling right alongside it? Jesus directly answers this with the parable of the wheat and the tares. A landowner sows good seed in the field, which Jesus later explicitly tells us is the world. But an enemy secretly invades and sows poisonous tares or weeds right in among the wheat. Naturally, when the workers see the weeds, they want to rip them out immediately, but the master forbids it, warning that uprooting the weeds now would totally damage the delicate root system of the wheat. Instead, both are permitted to grow together until the harvest. This perfectly corrects that first-century misconception. The Messiah isn't going to eradicate all evil in a single violent stroke upon his first arrival. The sons of the kingdom and the sons of the evil one are going to coexist in the world for a time.
A really crucial takeaway from the text here is that this delay is not a weakness. It is absolutely not a failure of messianic power. It's actually an act of sovereign covenant mercy, what the Old Testament calls chesed. By delaying the final judgment, God is intentionally affording historical space for the gospel to be widely proclaimed, for hearts to be transformed, and for a massive, multi-ethnic family to be gathered in.
This brings us to part 4, small seeds, massive growth, the unstoppable trajectory.
Okay, so now we understand why there's coexistence, but we really need to look at the actual trajectory of how this kingdom expands. It starts incredibly small, but where is it going? These two side-by-side parables show us the dual nature of the kingdom's growth. The mustard seed represents external expansion. It starts microscopic, literally the smallest of seeds, but it grows into a massive tree-like herb that shelters the birds of the air. Bates points out this directly fulfills Ezekiel 17, depicting the kingdom as a global shelter for all nations. Then we have the leaven. This represents internal transformation. It's hidden in the flour, quietly but pervasively penetrating and changing the entire batch from the inside out.
Think about this detail for a second. Jesus specifically mentions a woman hiding this leaven in exactly 3 pecks of flour. That was a massive amount of flour. We're talking enough to feed over 100 people. It emphasizes that God's reign isn't just going to change some tiny little corner of the world, it is going to completely, pervasively, and unstoppably leaven the entire batch of creation. It's going to penetrate every single sphere of society.
And that leads us to our final section, part 5, the final eschatological harvest, the climax. So where is all of this quiet, organic growth ultimately heading? What's the final destination of this two-stage kingdom? Jesus uses the parable of the Dragnet to assure his disciples of the climax. A massive net is cast into the sea, gathering fish of absolutely every kind. But when it's hauled ashore at the end of the age, there is a final sorting. The angels will concretely and apocalyptically separate the wicked from the righteous. This period of coexistence we're living in right now will absolutely culminate in a final judgment and separation, which powerfully echoes the sweeping judgment prophesied in Zephaniah chapter 1.
Let's pull this all together on a timeline so we can see the big picture. The kingdom of God operates on this really clear two-stage trajectory. First, you have the inauguration in the 1st century, sowing the word in a hidden, gradual form. Second, the present age, where we are right now, marked by the enigma of coexistence. This is the wheat and the tares growing together while the kingdom expands globally like a mustard tree. And finally, the end of the age, the ultimate harvest, where the righteous, as Jesus says, will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father, which is a direct, glorious fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12.
At the very end of this discourse, Jesus looks at his disciples and asks if they understand all these things. When they say yes, he calls them trained scribes. By working through this explainer today, you are stepping into that exact same role. A trained scribe of the kingdom is someone who can look into their storehouse and pull out the enduring Old Testament promises of God's covenant fidelity to Abraham and David, and seamlessly integrate them with the new, the beautifully unexpected reality of how they are actively being fulfilled right now in Messiah Jesus.
Before we wrap up, we have to talk about application, because Jesus also told 2 quick gem parables in this chapter, the hidden treasure and the pearl of great price. Both of these stories emphasize that finding this kingdom is worth joyfully selling and surrendering absolutely everything you own to obtain it. It demands total surrender. So understanding that this unstoppable kingdom is expanding right now, quietly but pervasively all around us, the ultimate question you must walk away with is this: how are you receiving the word today? What kind of soil is your heart providing for the kingdom right now?